Welcome everyone to our first CSEC review lesson. Since the whole COVID-19 outbreak, many of you have not been able to visit the Marine Lab for your regular presentation, which would have helped you with your studies. So we have decided to present to you on this platform so you can get to see everything that you could have if you were actually in person on the lab. So today we'll be looking at the first section, section 1, part 1 of the CSEC syllabus, which is living organisms. So we're going to be reviewing what is biology. It is a study of living organisms. If we break down the word biology, bio means life, logy, study of. Therefore, the study of life, the study of living organisms. Now, life has certain characteristics which can determine if something is alive or not. And there are 7 of them. 1. There's nutrition or feeding. If you notice right here, light and water and minerals from the soil go into the plant along with carbon dioxide to produce their food. Now this is a form of nutrition. The plant is making its own food. In the case of secondary and primary consumers, then they feed. So if they're not feeding or making their own food, then they cannot be considered alive. And then there's respiration. It's the process of making energy from the food that is stored in the body. So in the case of the plant produces energy, glucose, and when it's ready to use it, breaks it down back into carbon dioxide and water for respiration. So it stores energy and then it releases it later on. In the case of primary and secondary consumers, when they feed, they get the glucose as well, and then they can release energy in the form of ATP. There's also excretion. Some organisms excrete waste in different forms. In this picture, I have a mangrove leaf with salt being excreted from the leaves. If we go back, in the case of a plant, or even animals as well, we release carbon dioxide whenever we're respiring. That is a waste product, so it's being excreted. And then we have movement. The energy produced from respiration gives organisms the ability to move, whether it is full body movement, locomotion, or response to a certain stimuli, such as chemotaxis or phototaxis. Then organisms have that energy so they can move to a certain location or just shift their body or direction a little bit. And that's where irritability and sensitivity come in. For example, the Mimosa pudica or the Shamo lady is a plant which responds to stimuli. If you touch it, then the leaves will come together and fold. This is irritability or sensitivity. It responds to stimuli. And then there's growth. All organisms grow at some point. And if you look in the photo right here, you notice this plant transitions from a small stage and leaves getting bigger and bigger. Now this is possible due to the energy being produced from nutrition, which it harnesses from the sun and the soil, and for other organisms from the food that they eat. Now this is a dicotyledon plant, and we're coming to that later on in the lecture. And then there's reproduction. Organisms have to survive somehow, and one of their means of survival is reproduction, the creation of another generation, progeny. So we have different types of reproduction: asexual and sexual. Asexual does not require 2 parents for reproduction. In some cases, organisms can just break off into other organisms. So by fission, the organism produces other organisms like themselves. It's cloning. So it's a cloning process. And then you have organisms which can bud and form from a line, a runner. So organisms will bud from, in this case, a hydra, which is like a jellyfish. Fragments of it buds off and then they keep growing and growing and growing. So it's a clonal process. And then we have sexual reproduction, where you have two parents, diploid creatures, which create organisms through fertilization. Now you have different types of fertilization, internal and external. Most fishes produced by external fertilization, in which the eggs and the sperms are released into the water and then fertilization happens in the water body. While you have internal, in the case of humans, the baby is formed inside of the mother. What does classification mean? To put it simply, classification is just the organization of all living organisms. And modern classification is done based off evolutionary and structural likeness. So the sequencing of the deoxyribonucleic acid DNA, scientists use this for modern classification compared to the old days when simple classification used appearances, visual similarities. So the amount of legs, absence or presence of certain body parts. These are what make up the old simple classification. But now we use modern classification, which uses DNA sequencing. Why is it important? Because we do not want to get confused when trying to figure out which organism is which. It helps us to put everything together and understand the relationship between them. So for instance, you're in your class. There are four groups, group A, B, C, and D. Group A is cutting paper. Group B is gluing paper. Group C is coloring the paper. And group B is putting the paper on a collage. Now, when you have this classification for each group, we know for sure that everything is organized and we can easily find which group is doing what and know that this group is responsible for that duty. So that's where it comes into play to understand the interrelationship between organisms. Now, classification has a system and it is represented from domain to species. Domain being the broadest, encompassing of all living organisms. And then you have kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Species being the most specific one. So, for example, you have different types of sharks. The great white shark is a different species from the bull shark, so they're very specific. And a little mnemonic so you guys can easily remember the classification. Dear King Philip, come over for a great spaghetti. Or if you're not about that spaghetti, you can say spaghetti, whichever one sounds more interesting to you guys. So you can just use this to remember the different types of classification. There are three domains which encompass life. There's eukaryota, archaea, and bacteria. And from there, the domains are broken up into kingdoms. And the kingdoms are Prokaryote, Protactista, Plantae, Fungi, Animalia, Archaebacteria, and Eubacteria. But we'll be paying attention to the 5 kingdoms of modern classification, which are under Eukaryota. And a special note, viruses do not belong to any of the 5 kingdoms under Eukaryota, as they are simple organisms which are made up of a piece of DNA or RNA and surrounded by a protein coat, and they can only reproduce inside other living cells, so they don't have their own special structure. Let's talk about the main group of plants. There are 4 main groups of plants. We have bryophytes, which are mosses or liverworts. These are organisms with simple roots called rhizoids, and they have simple leaves and simple stems. They're normally found in cool, damp areas. Then we have ferns. Ferns are plants with specialized leaves and stems fused together called fronds. Now, these ferns reproduce by utilizing spores from on the abaxial side or the underside of their leaves, and then they spread these spores into a cool environment where they can settle and form their proper roots and then grow again. Next up are conifers. Most of these we know them as pine trees or firs. They produce seeds inside cones. So when you see a little cone on a tree with fine needle-like leaves, these are conifers. And then after that we have the flowering plants. The most common out of them all are the angiosperms. These plants have seeds which are produced from fruits which result from the presence of flowers. So among the flowering plants we have two different sets. We have monocotyledons. Now these usually have straight leaves with parallel veins, so it's easy to identify them, and the leaves are long and narrow. And the seed contains one cotyledon, so when the seed is sprouting, you'll see one single leaf come out after germination. And the flower part comes in multiples of threes. And an example of this would be palms and grasses. Many grasses, guinea grass, sugarcane, these are all different types of monocotyledons. Then we have dicotyledons. These plants are easily identified by having leaves with a broad network of veins, and the leaves are usually broader. And their seeds contain two cotyledons. So when they're coming up from germination, you notice these two leaves pop up, and the flower parts in multiples of 4 or 5. As you can see here, you see the leaves with the multiple veins all about. A good example of these as well are hibiscus plants, your mango tree. These are all dicotyledons. Now we move on to phylum. Under the kingdom Animalia, these are some of the most common phylums that you will find. We have mollusks, or soft-bodied creatures with a shell, either on the interior or the exterior. We have porifera, or the sponges. We have cnidarians. We have talking about our coral reefs, or jellyfish, or hydras. We have annelids. These are roundworms. You find plenty of them in the sea, and you find plenty of them on land as well. We have arthropods, talking about crustaceans, things with an external skeleton. We have echinoderms or echinodermata. These are spiny-bodied organisms, whether they are sea cucumbers, starfish, stars, sea urchins. These organisms which either have hard spines or soft spines, these are echinoderms. And for the vertebrate animal, chordata. Now, these are organisms which have an internal vertebral column in their body. For example, in the picture right here, you can see the dolphins. These are members of the phylum Chordata. And within Chordata, we can find the classes of fishes, amphibia, reptilia, birds or aves, and mammalia. And we'll be talking about some of the characteristics of these chordates. Fish. These organisms have a waterproof skin, which are usually covered with scales. There are a few exceptions of fish without scales, such as some jawless fish, eels. These organisms have a different type of covering on their body, which is not exactly scales. And fish have gills for breathing underwater, so they're specialized for surviving in aquatic conditions like that. And they usually have fins for swimming. Amphibians. Now, these are soft-bodied organisms. Skin is always moist, it's not waterproof, because they need the moisture in their skin to help them to breathe. And some of them breathe through their skin, as well as lungs. The eggs, for most of them, are laid in water. The larvae lives in the water as well, and the adults live on land. There are a few exceptions of some organisms, some frogs, which will lay their eggs in mud. And the larvae have gills to survive underwater. So if you take them under the water, they will die. And adults will survive out of the water. So we're talking about frogs, we're talking about our salamanders, these organisms. Reptiles. These are organisms with very dry skin, but their skin is very waterproof due to hardened scales which can be found on their body. And they lay eggs. These eggs have a rubbery shell, rubbery or leathery at most, and they are ectotherms. Most reptiles warm their body through the external environment. So if they want to get warmer, they have to go into the sunlight to warm up. So you may see a lizard on your veranda one day, just lying down in the sun. He's warming up after a very cold night. Now for aves or the birds, these are feathered organisms. They have beaks, no teeth whatsoever, and they lay eggs with a hard shell. And all birds, whether flightless or those who can fly, their forelimbs are modified to form wings. And they are homeothermic. That means they produce their own body temperature from within, just like mammals. And for mammals now, these are organisms with waterproof skin. The skin is developed in such a way that it can handle water up to a certain resistance. So most organisms have cuticle lining their skin that helps them to handle water running off it. And they have hair, most of them have hair, and most have sweat glands. And mammals are one of the class of organisms which have specialized teeth. They have many different types of teeth, whether it be canines, molar, premolar, incisors. They have all these different teeth in their mouth. And in some cases, like whales, they have baleen teeth. And mammals are organisms which feed their young. Breastfeeding, feeding their young with a nutrient-rich milk. Mammals are the only organisms which produce milk. And mammals are homeothermic. As you can see in the image here, we have a large whale. And that is it for this presentation. We hope you all enjoyed and learned something new. Stay tuned for more. Until next time.